And welcome. On behalf of GMF Digital, we're an initiative working to ensure that technology supports democratic values. I'm Karen Kornblue. We are delighted to be hosting today's discussion. This is the next in a series we're holding on technology in the time of Corona. You will be hearing from a panel of technologists and entrepreneurs who are filling gaps and solving problems in the midst of the pandemic. And we'll also be highlighting, in addition to the good news, ways in which government reform is needed. Each of these initiatives highlights how we need to do more to increase responsiveness to the most needy. We'll be following up with them on those activities, and we invite you to join us in those efforts. Today's panel will be hosted by Deputy Director Sam duPont, who joined GMF from the U.S. Trade Representative's Office. We're very grateful to the panel for joining us today and really looking forward to the discussion. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. I am Sam duPont. I am the Deputy Director of GMF Digital, and we are very excited to have Cori, Zarek, Marko Russiver, and Tilman Ehrbeck join us this morning for a discussion on bottom-up innovation to address a global pandemic. And I will invite them all to turn on their video and their mics now so we can get started. For our audience, we very much encourage you to engage in this conversation. There is a Q&A option down at the bottom of the screen, and you can submit your questions there, and I will do my very best to work your questions into our conversation. You can also engage with us on Twitter at GMF Digital. We'll be doing a little light live tweeting during the event, and it's a great way to stay in touch with our program in the future. So, without further ado, I'd like to begin with Cori. So Cori Zarek is the director of the Digital Service Collaborative at the Beek Center for Social Impact and Innovation at Georgetown. She is also a founder of US Digital Response, which is a volunteer-run, nonpartisan effort to help federal, state, and local governments with technology, data design, and more during the coronavirus crisis. In a previous life, Cori served as Deputy U.S. Chief Technology Officer in the White House. And Cori, I'd like to ask you about your work with U.S. Digital Response. So you partnered with a few of your fellow former Deputy U.S. CTOs to start U.S. Digital Response, which is matching volunteers with state and local governments that because of the coronavirus pandemic and the associated economic crisis, have certain needs, particularly technological needs, but not exclusively tech needs. Can you describe how the idea for this initiative came about, how you identified the demand for this kind of intervention among state and local governments, and then how you went about building U.S. Digital Response to answer that demand?
Thank you, Sam and Karen, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. It's great to be here to get together and talk about ways we can be creative problem solvers in this moment in time. So as you mentioned, Sam, in my day job, I'm at Georgetown University at the Beck Center, where the work we do brings together practitioners to conduct research on ways the public interest tech field can advance its work and serve our constituents around the world, around the country, and really drive for better outcomes. So we were working on some problem solving that was very ripe with some of the communities who then we've been involved with US Digital Response. So it's been a really great kind of seamless flow. To kind of back up a little bit, long ago, back in March, when the reality of what we were understanding was about to come our way, really started to set in. A few of my colleagues and I, as you mentioned, a couple other former deputy CTOs from our time in the Obama White House, we started talking to each other and thinking about some of the conversations we'd just been having kind of in the course of our day jobs with folks in mostly in state and local government. We had just held a convening and had to move it to video of a bunch of state and local leaders who are starting new digital service operations where they are. And of course, all anyone was talking about that first week of March was how they were preparing for COVID response. And as you know, we realized how massive this thing was going to be. You know, a few of us started talking to each other about the realization that what we were going to see was going to be an incredible strain on our government systems like we've never seen before. On a good day, our governments aren't typically equipped to staff the data and technology needs that we really could have to deliver services well. And when those systems are under strain, as they are in this moment and will continue to be for months ahead, you know, we really knew that there was going to be just a massive need for additional support and assistance. So over the next few days, you know, we started pulling people together on calls and just sharing information and understanding what some of those needs are from practitioners on the ground, and realized that this idea of kind of a tech surge, and New York State had just announced something like that, or they were about to, of volunteers who were technical, so data scientists, software developers, engineers, et cetera, but who could spend some amount of time just being extra capacity with a government team and helping them problem solve and helping them get online, helping them do all the things they needed to do in that moment. You know, that was a place where we saw a gap. And it didn't feel like, especially after, you know, 3-4 days worth of conversations and poking around, it just didn't feel like there was anyone else leaning into that space. And so that's where we stepped in to say, this is an area where we think we can be useful. And then at the same time, we started to see dozens and then hundreds of technologists around the country start to raise their hands to say, I want to help. I want to use my skills in this moment however I can. You know, I may not be a doctor, I may not be an expert on pandemics, but I can sure code, and so put me to work. So over the last couple of months, we've had now more than 5,000 people around the United States and even a few around the world sign up through our website to offer their services in a whole range of areas of expertise. Everything from kind of traditional tech to just communications and operations management and all the things that, you know, we need in a moment like this. We've got, I think about 150, 160 of them paired up on projects right now with maybe, let's say 20, 25 different government teams. And I can talk more about some of those examples. I know we want to keep the conversation moving, but it's been a really interesting, very grassroots, very of the moment, what can we do to problem solve together type of effort. And it's been really exciting to also see other locations around the world take on similar approaches. So in the US, we've got New York State and California and even New Jersey putting out calls like this. Around the world, our friends in Mexico launched Brigada Digital version of a digital response effort. In Germany, same thing, speaking with those folks in the morning. So, so we're really seeing lots of kind of grassroots ground level support springing up with putting techies to work.
You're muted.
Fantastic. Yes, thank you. Before we do turn to our other distinguished panelists, I would love to hear about one or two specific examples of partnerships that U.S. Digital Response has set up between technologists and state and local governments.
Sure. So I'll rattle off a couple quickly and we can follow up more later. Also, all of this information is on our website, usdigitalresponse.org. And you can follow us at USD Response on Twitter. So the state of New Jersey has been one of our biggest customers. And we have had a chance to work with them on a number of projects. Part of that, I think, is because over the last couple of years, the state has really invested in building its own internal infrastructure and beefing up its digital service capabilities by hiring Beth Novak as its Chief Innovation Officer and a whole team of people around her. So, you know, when you have a team like that, they know exactly what they need and they know how to spring to action in a moment like this. And that investment in infrastructure has allowed New Jersey to really run in recent weeks. So one thing one of our U.S. Digital Response volunteers built with New Jersey is a website to help small businesses navigate the kind of complicated question process to understand where they qualify for a small business loan in this moment. And so it's kind of that a wizard, the choose your own adventure path to understand whether, if yes, this, then maybe this type of thing. And so that, and like all of our projects, is open source. And so anyone else could adapt it for use for their small businesses in their jurisdiction. Another example that we do cite a lot, but it's a good one and it's been replicated a lot, is a little less technical and just a little more community minded. We heard from the city of Concord, California, which is a jurisdiction that's kind of spread out a bit. And the folks there recognized that some of their neighbors, especially seniors, did not have anyone who could help them get groceries or meals or run to the pharmacy, and they didn't have the ability to do it themselves. And so we helped create a tool called Neighbor Express, which is kind of like the Pony Express is where it was borrowed from. And it matches neighbors, local people in your community to come in and partner up with a senior or someone else in need and be able to bring them groceries or help them out. We've actually been able to adapt that platform for a couple of other purposes, including health workers in Louisiana. A bunch of folks in Canada have borrowed it. So it's been nice to see this work just kind of take on a life of its own, which is all we can hope for.
Fantastic. Well, Marko, I'd like to turn to you now. So Marko Russiver is co-founder of Guaana, a hackathon and ideation platform, and he is also one of the key organizers of the Global Hack, which was an effort to respond to the global pandemic with rapidly developed tech-based solutions. Previously, he was a creative director with 15 years of experience in strategy and service design, and has served as part of the European Commission's Next Generation Internet Roundtable. So Marko, the Global Hack brought together a really impressive group of people and organizations over a short period of time, first in March and then again in April, to engage in a sprint sort of to develop tools to address challenges that were arising because of the global pandemic. Can you tell us just how the Global Hack came together and what are some of the accomplishments that it has achieved?
Absolutely. First of all, I wanted to say that Cori, Stephanie Hannon was also part of our inspirational leads in the Global Hack. So thanks a lot for your organizations to stepping in and making people do the right kind of decisions and help them along with, not just in the States, but globally. But yeah, so Sam, the Global Hack, it was an escalation of what we called Hack to Crisis. And Hack to Crisis started on 13th of March, 10 a.m. to be specific. That's when I got a call from our government, the Estonian government. Nick Weinig, to be specific, he's a team lead, project lead in Accelerate Estonia, which is like a really bleeding edge governmental innovation program here in Estonia. And he asked if Guaana and I personally could get involved with hosting a virtual hackathon. At that point in time, I had no idea what he's talking about, to be honest. But we have a good working relationship and I trust the man. So I said, yes, let's do this. So it ended up a team, like an ad hoc team between Accelerate Estonia, Garage 48, which is a physical hackathon organization, like they organize physical hackathons, and Guaana, my startup, that's an evaluation and ideation platform for hackathons, and basically anything from results to the process before that. So we put our heads together. 6 hours later, it took us 6 hours to set it up. We had 1,300 people listening to our IT minister, who's also an ex-Skyper, a former one. He's not a minister anymore. And he was saying the welcoming words to 1,300 people who built the solutions to cope with the crisis for the next 48 hours. We didn't know what we kicked off at that point. Honestly, we thought it's going to be a one-off thing, but we ended up with 30 solutions as nominated as finalists. 8 of them are in use by our government right now, today. I can give you some examples later on of all of these things. But what happened later on, as a result of that, was the Latvians said they want to do one. And then we had the Finnish and the Norwegians and Swedish. We had India, New Zealand, Australia. Suddenly we had 63 hackathons all over the world, using the same blueprint that we wrote down for them. And what was really great is that not just the blueprint that we started, they also started adding to it. So that blueprint grew over time when people finished their hacks. They also jumped into what we call our organizer Slack. There's over 800 people now there who, first of all, came in there to find help, to organize their own hackathons, to get the knowledge and understanding what they should do and what they should not do. But also they stayed to help the next ones coming in. So it was a really interesting moment when we really, as the core team, didn't have to be that present anymore, because the Latvians started teaching the Brazilians how to do things, and that was really cool. But overall, I think 2 weeks in, we realized we need to escalate this, because all of these Hack the Crisis events were regional. Local problems tend to need local solutions. I can't imagine hackers or techies from New York building chatbots for Estonian teenagers. It just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Very complex language differences, and vice versa. Just doesn't work like that. But we realized there's a lot of problems that need global solutions. So we escalated to what we call now the global hack. We partnered with United Nations, European Commission, New America, and European Space Agency, Art Directors Club of Europe, World Bank. There were a lot of organizations involved. Also, what really surprised me was how much startups and corporations jumped in, like Zoom, Slack, and Facebook were all involved in very high level. Never wanted any credit for it, just jumped in when they saw a need. We had mentors like Bill Tai, Reid Hoffman, Christopher Schroeder, Mona Hamdi, then your own Karen Kornbuch jumped in, and that was really great. Samantha Cristofanetti, the astronaut. It was a really versatile bunch of people from around the world who have accomplished a lot, and they came in and inspired, just like Stephanie Hannan from the US Digital Response Group. This knowledge and understanding of how to do things was super critical at the time, and they showed up. So we grew the team from 6 people to 40. We fundraised 220,000 euros as prize money. We had, in the global hack, we had 12,000 participants for the 48 hours, but total with the Hack the Crisis, we had over 200,000. And we had a PR coverage of over 600 million views, including CNN, Wall Street Journals, and Euronews, and all the Asian and Arabian news outlets out there. And my favorite, absolute, the most moving moment was when a friend of mine, Erika Badu, she showed up to welcome people at the finishing line and gave a concert for the hackers, because she's one of the hackers. Like, she's a perfect and beautiful example of how a non-techie can take care of their community. Like, she, as a result of understanding that she's not going to give any concerts, she and she understood how many families are connected to her concerts happening, like all the catering, the stage technicians, and so forth. She started hosting live shows from her home that turned into spectacular performances. And the result of that, she's done 3 of them now. The first one, she charged $1 for access, second $2, and third $3. And she shares that $1 or $2 or $3 with the community. And she built the whole streaming platform for it. So she's one of us, So just wanted to shout out to her, because that's I think is a definition of a good leader. Yeah, so that's pretty much how it happened. I guess that answered your question.
Tremendous. Yeah, thank you. So Tilman, if I can come to you now. So Tilman Ehrbeck is managing partner at Flourish, which is a venture firm investing in long-term capital in entrepreneurs focused on helping users achieve financial health and prosperity. Before Flourish, Tilman was a partner at Omidyar Network and served for 5 years as CEO of CGAP, the Consultative Group to Assist the Poor, which is a global partnership to advance financial inclusion. So Tilman, as an investor focused on the intersection of technology and people's financial well-being, in a moment in which so many people are under intense and even unprecedented financial strain, how have some of your portfolio companies been adapting to the crisis? And how, if at all, has your strategy as an investor changed in what you're looking for in portfolio companies?
Yeah, thank you, Sam, and thank you, Cori and Marko. Very inspiring to hear from you. So we are a fintech investor with purpose, Sam, as you say, and we invest in the US and in large emerging markets like India, Indonesia, Nigeria, Kenya, Brazil, Mexico. I focus probably a little bit on the US, given the audience. I start by saying everybody wants to make a contribution. I think it's a very human reaction. All of us, all the folks in the audience, we all want to make a contribution. And that was no different across our portfolio and work. And it probably falls into 3 buckets. First, there's all the portfolio companies, and we as fintech investors had been betting on digital channel, remote access, all these type of things already, which are now obviously more relevant in a world in lockdown. And so there are companies like challenger banks. We have 2 in the US, Chime and Aspiration, mobile only or digital only, mobile first. They have seen a huge upsurge in user sign up, right? Because people need to be able to operate in a digital payment world. So another example in that realm is we have an insurtech company in the workers' comp space. These are wearable devices that industrial workers wear in logistics centers. And of course, those are now vital to keep us all going. And they have built in social distancing alerts into the wearable device so that the workers can operate safely in the warehouse. So there's a lot of what our portfolio does, and which sees a rapid acceleration in their usefulness. They thought this will take years. Now things are happening in weeks. So that's the first bucket. A second category is we have portfolio companies who know their users very, very well and have deep interactions with them. And they were thinking, what more can we do? So for example, there's an app called EBT Fresh. It's a company out in Brooklyn. They work with food stamp recipients in the US. They have 3.5 million monthly or active users, very engaged. And they had already provided them with budgeting tools, etc. And they now realized, they knew in March already that people are losing jobs and other income opportunities. And they can, because of the relationship, identify particularly vulnerable population segments, single mothers with kids in hard-hit zip codes. So they started an effort to raise 100 million, and we contributed to that. So to complement the federal relief efforts and to advance money faster. So they just issued $1,000 to folks that they identified or could identify. And that got quite a bit of press. We got celebrity help. So Stephen Colbert talked about it. And you might find that interesting from a policy angle. The universal basic income crowd got quite excited. So Andrew Young became a spokesperson as well. So that's the second bucket. People who know, we have a gig economy platform in the US called Steady. Same thing, they are trying to help the folks on their platform because they know there are obviously fewer Uber rides and Lyft rides going on. On the other hand, right, there are opportunities for drug delivery, medical drug delivery, etc. So there's a second category of portfolio companies that are springing into action because they know their customer base very well. And then the third category of efforts is around how can we help de-bottleneck, and it links to what Cori and Marko were talking about. We have a policy entrepreneur in our portfolio, former deputy OCC commissioner in the US, Joanne Barefoot, and she has an organization called the Alliance for Innovative Regulation. And they organized over a weekend in early April a hackathon to help understand the SBA process, the Small Business Administration process, and the program in particular, the Payroll Protection Program. And they identified solutions that could help, such as batch processing, and fed that into the discussions on the renewal. So we are firing our portfolio and our company, we are firing on all cylinders as far as short-term help and mitigation efforts are concerned. We have to think about the long term, and there are clearly opportunities and there are constraints, including regulatory political constraints. Maybe we can explore those in the second round of questions, but let me stop here on sort of what the portfolio is doing. You also asked about strategy change. To be honest, long term, I do not know yet, right? This is unprecedented in terms of pandemic, economic implication. There's a couple of things that we can safely predict, right? We will be working more from home. We will be traveling less. We will be accelerating the digitization of our daily lives. But a lot of things are also not clear yet. So I think we need to be humble when it comes to long-term predictions. But I say that so far, because we had bet on fintech, the digitization, because it's better, faster, cheaper, we have actually somewhat perversely or ironically, these trends we had been betting on are now having tailwinds. And we need to make sure that that's a privilege and an obligation to make the most out of what we can do to help societies open up more productively, more safely, under very, very uncertain times.
Wonderful, thank you. And some of what you just discussed puts in my mind another category of work that Cori has been focused on. So Cori, in your day job at the Beck Center, you initiated a project, and I think you touched on this at the beginning, that's looking at the tech-enabled social safety net. And you kicked this off in February, and then in the 3 months since, our social safety net has come under totally unprecedented strain. So your project was initially geared to leverage better technology, better data, better design to increase the fraction of people who are eligible for benefits that actually receive them, as I understand it. I'm interested to know how, if at all, you have pivoted since the start of the pandemic, and what you are learning from the pandemic, or at least the first few months of it, as you think about how to deliver benefits to people who ought to be getting them.
Yeah, it was a timely project to take on because there's an entire category of people in our country who struggle to meet their needs and thrive every day, and all of those individuals are under even more duress and strain, as are the systems in this moment. So we had, over the period of a few months, been thinking about some research we could do to really understand what's out there. There are dozens of interesting and innovative solutions that companies have created, that NGOs have built, that governments themselves have kind of strung together. We wanted to understand what's working and what's working well. What about it is working well? Is it because the policy landscape is ripe to allow this particular tool to thrive? Is it because there was a great, that there was dedicated budget? There was, what was the scenario that allowed some of these solutions to be working well? And then where was there room for improvement? So we kind of just set out to do one of those good old fashioned environmental scans to just understand the state of play. And as we were getting that project started, we brought on a couple of brilliant research fellows. They were making the rounds and meeting all of the people, and then things quickly changed. And we realized these individuals who we wanted to kind of embed with and do deep research with had bigger problems to solve, rightly so. And so we thought, kind of went back to the drawing board and thought about how can we be useful in this moment, and realized a traditional 9-month academic deep dive research project may not be the most useful output in the moment. And so we set our fellows out to understand what some of the most, the first round, I should say, probably, of kind of pain points and crises were, and see where we could jump in and be useful and play kind of that scouting, research, information sharing, coordinating role. And so what would have been this very nice, lengthy, robust report we might publish in the fall is probably going to be a much more iterative living document, honestly probably what we should have done all along. And we'll be publishing our findings as we go. So one of those specific issue areas that came up quite quickly is on pandemic EBT, so the ability for individuals who need food assistance to get that, and particularly you know, kids who eat breakfast or lunch or both at school and are no longer able to do that. Families now have to figure out how to find the resources to feed kids 2 meals a day they otherwise weren't feeding them. And so organizations and governments have been getting creative in how they do that, and our team has been trying to pitch in and support that work. So for example, Code for America, this great 10-year-old civic tech organization in the United States that's been doing a lot of community building and network engagement, but also direct product development for governments, is working on a solution with California. You can read about it on the Code for America blog. And so our team's been pitching in on that and trying to think about, if this works well in California, and we will see, is there a way we can scale it and support that replication elsewhere? So we're trying to be flexible and creative in this moment and think about what is really the highest and best use of everyone involved. And you know, I think as great as it will be eventually to have a environmental scan of what's working and what's not, I think we have bigger problems to solve in the immediate moment, and we'd rather be working on that.
Yeah, I know. I think that makes sense. And going from that, I'd love to turn the conversation a little bit to how the kinds of bottom-up entrepreneurial initiatives that you all are involved in can be better integrated with government, and what you should be looking for from governments, and where governments are best positioned to be providing ongoing support or investment or work to achieve the kinds of ends that you're working for. So Marko, maybe to turn to you, you know, one of the critiques you sometimes hear about hackathons is that they're sort of one-time solutions. But in many cases, they're working towards solutions that, you know, probably deserve to be made permanent. I know you mentioned that a few of your projects have already been picked up by various governments around the world. So I'm interested to hear from you how you achieve sustainability, and how the solutions that have been developed for the global hack have been turned into, whether by governments or others, turned into more long-lasting solutions.
I think you hit the nail with that one. I remember the early days when we were still working on putting together the Hack to Crisis document so others could use it. I had a call with Christopher Schroeder and Alan Blue, and both of them advised to keep, you know, governments involved with every hackathon. And the reason for it is very simple. When you have the stakeholders involved from the get-go, then, you know, the doors are open for getting solutions applied. Meaning that, and also, Sam, I think you also are correct. Some hackathons do deserve the critique for providing solutions that are not, you know, long-term, and you know, they're just like a little painkiller here and there. But at the same time, not every solution should change the world. Some of those things do their job in a month, and that's all that's needed. I'll give you one example of this that thankfully has not even been used even once, but I'm really happy it's out there. out of the Estonian hackathon came a platform for medically trained volunteers that maps them and gathers them and gives access to the hospitals in Estonia, meaning that if there is an emergency or crisis when more hands are needed, the volunteers can come running. Thankfully, it's not been used even once. So I'm pretty happy about that. But at the same time, I'm really thankful it's there. But another example is like something really simple, like Cori explained, a really simple solution that is having a tremendous impact. The same with one of our solutions is a chatbot called civic, which is an interesting chatbot in the sense that it understands slang, and it's now connected to all of the governmental websites where people are looking for help or understanding or data. And it's also connected to some of the media websites. So like younger generation or like our generation can go and look things up from there, people who know how to use chatbots, right? But at the same time, as another solution, it opens up the hotlines for elderly people so they don't panic. They also get the information easily. So it kind of funnels stuff. But if you think long-term, this chatbot actually changes a lot. It's a new way for the government to communicate with citizens here. So, something that started out of this crisis and is applied for solving a communication problem is now something that, will be used in the future for communication. Another thing that probably will become a norm, I hope at least, is a platform called ShareForce One. It enables companies to share their workforce with each other legally. They worked out the platform and also the whole legislation part of it, meaning that people don't have to be let go. They're not getting laid off. Rather, companies share their workforce. For example, hotels that are closed down, they can work with the delivery companies now. There's a lot of these solutions that come out of crisis and they look temporary at first sight, but long-term, they can change how markets work.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer. Thank you. Tilman, maybe to come to you with a related question. Private investment is it's obviously only one side of the coin. And in some cases, the kinds of work that you just described your portfolio companies doing, they're filling gaps that arguably in some cases should be government functions. Debottlenecking the Small Business Administration's grant distribution process is great work and tremendously important. In an ideal world, obviously, the government would be doing that itself. And so from the perspective of a fintech investor, I'm interested to hear your perspective on what the investments our governments should be making to upgrade our national digital infrastructure.
Yeah, so in financial services, which is what I mostly do, there's just no doubt that government is hugely important. And it's not government as a monolith, right? It's government as a big player and user. It's government as a regulator. It's government as a provider of a public infrastructure, conceivably, as a legislator. So multifaceted and for good reasons, right? The financial sector needs to be regulated, etc. So that's maybe context. And I say first, bad news for the US is we really, really are behind. We always knew that relative to others in the world. And the current crisis has made that very, very painfully obvious. We happen to have a portfolio company that operates in Africa, but it's based in Switzerland. It got its SBA equivalent loan between submitting the application and the money in the bank in 30 minutes because they could pull all the information required, etc. In India, the government, the federal government, the union government in India can reach hundreds of millions of poor families on the margins or in the informal economy with a push of a button. because they made the public digital infrastructure investments over the last 10 years. And we have to send checks that might bounce back or whatever it is. So we are way behind in the US. We knew this and we need to do something about that, right? The good news is there are starting points for most of this in most areas. And I list just 3 areas that have this component of public-private partnership, maybe public utility, maybe public investment. One is payment infrastructure. It's not as fast and it's not as cheap as it could be and as it is in many, many other places around the world. One data point that just upsets me always when I think about it, it's in overdraft fees in the US. And this might not apply to all of you guys, but my teenage kids certainly have incurred them. It's 24 billion a year, right? That is when you go to a Starbucks and you get a coffee and you didn't have enough money in your current account balance. From a technology perspective, that shouldn't exist, right? They know what the balance is. So payment systems could be much, much better and faster. The Federal Reserve in the US has resurrected its FedNow effort. And I think there is an opportunity for private sector solutions with a public framework to come together for faster, better, cheaper payments. Hugely important, always, and even more so in a crisis situation like this. Identity is another issue, right? Second issue. In financial services, there are know your customer requirements for good reasons. We don't want money laundering. We don't want terrorism finance. We need to have a much more open architecture, API-based ability to draw on government data. Congress already mandated that the IRS creates that API to pull income verification data. That would have been huge in the SBA context. We need to accelerate these type of efforts, including maybe using DMV photo databases for KYC purposes. It raises all sorts of new issues around the balance, privacy, etc. But we need to think about that. So identity, how to accelerate that. And that leads me to my third point, maybe more broadly about data. We should have at least banking data portability, similar to mobile phone number portability. You remember, I'm old enough to remember that you couldn't change your cell phone very easily because you had to change your cell phone number. And that was very painful. You had to let all sorts of people know that you have a new number and you didn't want to do that. So you were stuck with your provider. When they made cell phone numbers portable, game changer. We can do the same with financial data, right? Which is hugely, hugely helpful. I should be able to say, hey, my bank A, I want a mortgage from provider B, please send all the data that you have on my behalf to that other provider. Today, that's not possible, really. And in the US, again, there's a starting point. There is an act that regulates financial data. It's Leach-Bliley came out of another crisis back in the 90s, pre-iPhone, right? So we should really address these issues around payment, identity, data, big policy issues. Private sector investment cannot tackle these on their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and data portability is obviously a big conversation in many areas of the tech policy world. I actually was not familiar with the banking angle of that, so it's interesting. Cori, if I can come to you with sort of an angle on this question as well, just looking back at your time at the White House and the kinds of work that you were involved in there, if you were to return and say give advice to the people who were in that role now or will be in that role in the future, what kind of advice would you have for the U.S. government in terms of leveraging technology to improve service delivery, to improve the administration of programs, to improve the distribution of benefits, and so forth?
Sure. And also, Sam, we're doing Q&A, yeah? Should our folks be putting in questions if they have them?
I'm already answering some. I'm not even kidding.
You are? Oh, man, I'm not even on top of it. Okay, well, glad you guys have it covered. Thank you.
I will take this opportunity to encourage the audience to use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. I think Marko has already answered one question in the chat, but if you have questions, I'm happy to bring them into the conversation. But please, Cori, go ahead.
Sure. So, you know, I was in the White House through the transition into the Trump administration, and we had a very friendly and warm handoff from the tech team to the incoming tech team. And in fact, many of the technologists who came in are, like most government workers, career or civil servant types who are there day in and day out. And so some of the teams that were built and established in recent years, including the US Digital Service and 18F, and then the many different big teams in government agencies that provide digital service support and tech policy work and all of those things are still there and still doing great work. So that's wonderful, because the first thing I would say is it's really important to have what my former boss, US CTO Megan Smith, would call TQ, tech quotient, having that understanding of the tech landscape and having that TQ in decision-making processes at the table, in the meetings, in the rooms. And the fact that the bench is still fairly strong and quite deep across our government at the national level makes it so that, you know, they're really set up to be helpful and responsive in a moment like this. The folks in the US Digital Service are, I know, spending night and day working on ways to problem solve around COVID. The thing I would add is that the federal government and the White House specifically has a convening power like no other. And that was something we really tried to lean into whenever we could while we were there. Of course, subnational governments, states, cities, counties have the independence and autonomy, as they should, to make decisions in their own ways to meet their own needs. But it is so helpful to be able to come together and share information and understand what your counterparts are doing, think about how to problem solve together. And that was, you know, that was an area with US Digital Response where we're stepping in to be a support system here, and one where I think it would be great to see just the ability to leverage that convening power when possible to bring people together and get them talking to each other and sharing what works. And so I'd love to see a little bit more of that as we settle into the many weeks and months ahead of this recovery period. How can we be doing more coordinated work all together?
Great, thanks. So we've got a question from a good friend of GMF, Christopher Schroeder.
Is there?
The question is from Marko. So Marko Chris is asking, how do you measure follow-through of implementation and impact of all these amazing ideas that you have nurtured?
Okay. First of all, hi, Chris. Christopher has been a tremendous help, and for me, someone who's been someone I can always count on when doors needed to be opened or advice needed to be get. So thank you, Chris. I just want to take this moment to thank you for your work with the Global Hack. So the answer to the question. Currently, we're in the focus of putting together a nonprofit that will continue carrying on the global hackathons, not just related to this crisis. You know, there are other big problems around the world that need solutions. This was not a one-off thing. But also, what we're doing is we're doing what we call the cheesiest possible name ever for an event called the Matchathon, meaning that we will have not just finalists from the Global Hack event, but also finalists from Hack the Crisis events and other hackathons that Europe, for example, has done on European Commission level, and match them with organizations and VCs and mentors that are relevant to their activities. For example, we've already talking with World Economic Forum, we've been talking with IBM. There's a lot of interested parties, different VCs from around the world who are reaching out to us saying, like, we want to work with these teams, these solutions are great. So we figured instead of making this like one-on-one introductions, which we also do because we work closely with the teams, we are going to connect them in a methodological way that allows us to carry on using the same methods and processes also after the next hackathons. It's just growing this change maker community over the years and with every hackathon we have. So this is one of the big things for us is definitely the aftercare of these teams that are not even companies yet, some of them, to make sure that their great ideas fly. With our internally in our team, I just described that our job is to be basically the mushroom in the Super Mario games. Like when they come in, they're small, and then they meet us, and suddenly they can do everything, right? Yeah. So I hope that answers the question.
Best analogy ever.
Yeah.
Analogy I think we can relate to. So we have another question here from Paula Stern. So Paula asks what we should be doing to redress the paucity of girls and women in the future of our tech industries. I think this is probably relevant to all of your work, Marko, in terms of the people you get engaged in your hackathons, Tilman, the kinds of companies you invest in, Cori, certainly in the work of both the Beck Center and US Digital Response. So I will put the question out there, and whoever would like to jump on it first may jump on it, may go ahead. I think Paula is particularly interested in getting at how we redress the dramatic underrepresentation of women and girls in tech, sort of the tech pipeline, and in terms of education, as well as in the industry as a whole.
I can start if you want. I'm from a different background. I'm not in the States, so I'll just give from background from the startup scene and tech sector here in Estonia, and what I've noticed in Europe might be completely different from what's happening in the US. In our case, we do, for example, the Global Hack Executive Board is all female. Also, a lot of women founders that are running some of the most fastest growing startups in Estonia. It's been an interesting change in the last, I would say, 3 to 4 years, where at least in Estonia, Karoli Hindriks, who's considered now like top 50 most influential startup founders in Europe, and Kaidi Ruuselep, who completely took on how it tokenized basically the startup investment process through Funderbeam. So there's a lot of really powerful women leaders coming up in tech, at least in this area, that I'd really like to see, because I think we all win from it. It's something that just was wrong for a really long time, but it's getting better here now. One thing though, when we had I'm a startup founder myself, so when we had the Startup Leaders Club, like a get together as we do every year, I noticed an interesting thing that most of women founders didn't know each other. I kept introducing them to each other all evening, and that was really bizarre for me. So in January this year, I took the liberty of founding the Women-Only Startup Leaders Club, and I asked them to kick me out, but they turned me into an operations officer instead. So it's a lovely club now that gets together and shares information. And I think these kind of things need to pop up. There's a lot of industry knowledge and partnership knowledge and so forth that these leaders need to share with each other. That's all from my side.
Yeah, and to just jump right in, I think there's also a lot that some of us who are already here can and should do to make it possible and easy for the people we'd like to see represented to actually step up and be able to get more involved. And so I think that's where, like for example, at Georgetown on my team, we've really prioritized making sure that, if we're focused on a portfolio that's national and even global, that the team we hire reflects all of those people, that we have a good geographic representation, that we have a balance between genders, that we have people of color well represented in the work that we're doing. People who come from backgrounds where they have navigated the social safety net themselves, to go back to the project that we've mentioned. So it's, in my experience, if it is not a priority and likely a top priority of your management and leadership, then it's probably not something that's going to happen, because it doesn't just happen naturally. And so I've been fortunate to learn from others who've set those priorities in motion. Our teams at the White House, when we helped to stand up the U.S. Digital Service in 18F, those teams were gender balanced. They were geographically represented, all of America, and in fact included people who were physically working out of different parts of the United States and not just based in Washington, D.C. They were racially inclusive, and really tried to make sure that we had the different intersections accounted for, because those teams truly did need to represent all of America. And I think wherever we go, whether it's in coming up with a great idea for a hackathon, or launching into a research project, or building an ad hoc NGO to provide rapid response in the time of COVID, those are really important considerations. With U.S. Digital Response, 3 of our 4 founders are women. One's a woman of color. The core team of volunteers is, that sort of mix that we're striving for, to make sure that we are taking into account all these different needs. The specific question Paula raised was about pipeline as well. And so give me 1 second to mention that. At Georgetown, we have lots of young students, and now recent graduates and young professionals, who are very anxious about the job market they are entering into. Many of them come to our center, the Beck Center, interested in certainly in working in public interest, and also in working in the public interest tech space. And there are not a lot of easy pathways for entry-level people, particularly whether women or people of color, but just anyone. Those pathways don't really exist for that early career and entry-level pipeline. And so if we want to get more girls and more young people into these roles, we do need to put in the work to kind of get our leadership ready for that. So that's another project that we're working on at the Beck Center. Like, how can we actually get a little bit more mature in this field so that we're ready to bring on some of those entry-level folks?
Sam, real quick, I very much share the concern of the question, or that underlies the question, and that Cori and Sam picked up as well. And it starts in your own firm, and if you look at our website, we are doing pretty well, although we could, I'm sure, do better. I have this bigger concern about the digital, in addition, I have the macro concern about the digital divide actually deepening in our societies. And you read these stories around people having to drive to a parking lot to get the Wi-Fi of a Starbucks, and so to connect. Or how do you homeschool kids when you have 1 computer, but you have 3 children at home, right? And they should attend the same lessons. And not homeschooling, I mean online schooling, right? So there's a lot that we need to do on the gender, on the economic background, diversity, and to really fight the digital divide, which will become bigger, or is more exposed now than it was before.
We had just jumping in to share that we had a very interesting and challenging problem with the same thing that you just described, Tilman, but from the perspective that the African Innovation Week was hosting a Pan-African hackathon in Guaana, our platform, and there were situations where people, like, I think there was like out of 3,000 or something submissions, I think we added like 100 later additionally, because there were rains and the electricity stopped working and the internet dropped off, and we had to be ready for a lot of submissions coming in through mobile phones instead of computers, meaning that the whole user experience changes during that process. And I think this is like a major, I see one of the questions here, like, how do you have people representing rural America, very poorly internet connected America in your teams? That's something that probably comes up later. But thinking about that, being inclusive and thinking about these situations is super important. So thank you for bringing that up, Tilman.
Thank you all. So we're at the top of the hour, so we should wrap up. We did get one more great question that I think can serve as sort of a prompt for any closing remarks each of you would like to make. So Greg Kinsella asked, when the government is looking to provide the public with solutions, how can they scan the vast startup ecosystem to ensure they have the tech quotient that Cori mentioned earlier, and ensure that they're identifying the best solutions on the market? So if that inspires a thought in your mind, feel free to draw on that for any closing remarks you may have, or feel free to share any other thoughts you'd like to as we wrap up.
If you yourself are in this position, you're a person working in government and you need to procure some type of tool or software or solution, and you don't yourself have that tech quotient, find someone who does. Whether it is someone in another part of your government, whether it's a volunteer, whether it's a friend, whether it's asking Twitter, find someone who, maybe not that last one, find someone who knows and work with them to make sure that you are fully understanding the complexities of the issue. Find your expert.
Yeah, I would add that meet us halfway from a startup founder point of view. If you want to work with us, don't overcomplicate the processes for us, because we're used to moving fast. And if you slow us down, it costs us money, because time equals money for startups. So try to be very present when you work with startups.
Mm. You know, Arundhati Roy, the Indian author, wrote this beautiful piece in the Financial Times where she said every crisis is also the portal to a new beginning. At least it touched me quite a bit. I think if there's a silver lining in all of this, there's really an incredible willingness to work together, and everybody is home. We are not traveling. Scheduling is easier. I found that there is an incredible ability and a willingness to cooperate and build trust very quickly over Zoom, as the three of us, or at least I had not met many of you before. I'm sure something will come out of this right here and there, and that is giving me hope. Civil society is coming together to complement what the health authorities and others need to do.
Well, thank you all very much. Thanks to our audience for joining us, and thank you immensely to our three panelists for joining us this morning in the United States, this evening in Europe, at a moment when we're all feeling self-conscious about our haircuts and locked in our bedrooms. It means a lot to have you here with us and sharing your wisdom. So thank you very much. Karen, do you have any closing thoughts?
Thank you, Sam, and thank you for this great panel. And please, just if you could go around and just tell people the Twitter handle or the website or whatever, so that they can get involved in your efforts.
And we will be broadcasting Twitter links to Cori, Marko, and Tilman from our account at GMF Digital. So hope we can help to make that connection ourselves.
But why don't you all go around and just quickly give folks a way they can get involved?
If you're interested in volunteering with US Digital Response, or better still, if you're a government that's looking for some support, find us at usdigitalresponse.org or on Twitter at USDResponse. I'm at Cori Zarek, and my day job at Georgetown is at Beck Center, BEECK Center. Thanks.
Okay. Tilman, it's okay. I'll go next if that's
go.
all right.
I cleverly prepared, you know.
You did. I see. So you don't have to even. All right. I'm going to pick up on that next time. But you can find me in LinkedIn. I prefer that platform. And also by my name, Marko Russiver. The hackathon platform that I mentioned that I'm a founder of is Guaana.com. You can also find the links to that there. The globalhack.com is if you want to know who were the finalists in the Global Hackathon. And feel free to also, hit me up in Twitter. It's at Marko Russiver, but don't expect an answer too fast. I'm sorry. So
we are, this is a mirror image, I think. It's difficult. Okay, so there's my Twitter handle. Our website is flourishventures.com. My email is tilman@flourishventures.com. Most of what we talked about in particular, the portfolio reactions, it's all written up, it's on our website. One thing we want to do now is help with unemployment insurance sign up, messy process in the US, state-based. Only 5 states have a mobile app, for example. And I know there are already cooperation opportunities, even across the panelists here. So let us know, very eager to cooperate and help.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Sam, for leading a great discussion.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks for having us.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.